Alright, here we are live after the board meeting.
Trying again? Take two?
Yes, take two.
Okay.
Sorry, everybody.
Alright, so tonight, the first thing that the trustees spent a whole bunch of time talking about was recapture. Again, I know we talked about this last month, or talked about how they talked about it last month, but basically HISD is now considered property rich, and in the Robin Hood state finance scheme that we have in Texas, HISD for the very first time has to give money to the state, around $165 million. And so there was much lamenting again by trustees about how the ballot language is confusing, and it was pretty clear tonight, I think it's safe to say, that all, or at least most of the trustees are going to publicly come out in public against telling voters they should vote against this. We think there was a lot of talk about how we're the biggest district, and that if we do this, that other districts will stop paying too, and that this will break the system. That theory was also floated that if we vote this down, then the business community will be up in arms, and they have more influence on the legislature than HISD voters do, and that could change things, that could force the state to act. If you're asking my personal opinion, I think waiting on the state legislature to do anything is a gamble.
Particularly related to taxes?
This system has been in place for over 20 years. It's been in court multiple times, and they haven't changed it. And so it's not a question of do we pay the money or not, it's do we do it an easy way or the hard way. And if we do it the hard way, it's a $30 million loss. The hard way is more expensive. And so, again, there's room for discussion on both sides of this.
The trustees refuse to talk about that. They want to make the conversation about do you want to send $160 million to Austin or not, as if that's the choice. The choice is, do you want to send $160 million because that's what's owed to them by law, or do you make them take the property away from us? And when we do that, not only do we lose the $160 million from the operational budget, we lose the ability to tax that property for the bond money. And if you do the math, it's a $30 million difference.
Are you pointing the camera on you?
No, I'm not.
Point the camera on you when you talk. Come on.
And no trustee would ask the CFO of the district, right there, how much is it if we vote no, and they take the money away? It's like they go right up to the calculation and say they're going to have to take away $18 billion worth of property from HISD's tax rolls, but they don't go the next step to say, okay, 18 billion times our total effective tax rate equals $195 million, which is a lot more than $162 million.
Right.
No one's talking about that because these guys want to play politics with our kids' money.
So that was a big, I think we're going to keep hearing about that until the November election. So the next thing that they voted about was a resolution about some textbooks that the State Board of Education is considering for a vote in November that are very offensive to many Mexican Americans and Latinos in the state. And so LULAC, which is an organization that represents Latinos, asked the district to endorse and adopt a resolution against these textbooks, and the school board voted unanimously to do that, which was a good thing.
They also encourage voters to make your voice heard to the State Board of Education about this, so get out there.
Yes, so
Where's your
go
phone?
Speak against it. So one of the next things, and something that they spent a whole bunch of time talking about, was an item that we spoke on tonight, which was every month there's an agenda item about contracts that are over $100,000. The board has to vote on those. And tonight, noticed that one of the contracts that was in there was a $550,000 contract for educational testing service, which is the vendor that does the STAR test. And so we were asking around, we asked our trustee, we couldn't get really any answers about what specifically this item was for. The agenda was not clear. And so we found out tonight, though, from Ms. Eastman, our trustee, that it is about, it was basically money to ask ETS to rescore assessments, which happens more regularly than you'd like to think, that maybe your principal thinks that or a teacher thinks that a test was scored incorrectly and they ask ETS to rescore, and I think it costs like $25 every time. So this is $550,000 to do that, and also for additional reports that aren't normally provided, which is crazy that they can't get whatever they want from the vendor. But anyways, so I spoke against it, and then
and one of the things that you said that was really important is you said these trustees are often talking about how STAR isn't their choice, that's a state issue and they have to do it. Well, tonight's decision on whether to pay ETS $500,000 worth of additional services beyond that was their choice.
Yeah.
And Sarah reminded them of that.
For tests that are even valid this year.
Right. So, but what happened was the board, several trustees brought up another issue that has been ongoing, having to do with after-school program vendors, and that the procurement process for that has been really terrible, and they just recently changed it, and they lost a whole bunch of vendors that people like, and so because of that, the trustees were fed up with that. They've been complaining about it for many months and it hadn't been fixed. Like all the contracts were voted down. So it was a good victory. Hard to know if it was because like we spoke up
because
or not.
They didn't like the testing contract. Probably not. More likely somebody's missing after school yoga and their constituents are pissed.
Whatever. It went away, which is a good thing.
Which the big ask was though for procurement
it will
to start to fix their systems too.
There was discussion about asking procurement. That was the purpose behind the no vote, was to force procurement to fix this. So hopefully that will happen, and we think that that's a good thing.
Also, another thing that no one talked about there, and the administration is not going to bring it up, and the trustees don't really know what's going on, is that the real problem with procurement here isn't that they've come up with some, policy or something. It's that HISD is going through a multi-million-dollar revamp of their financial systems with the big software vendor SAP, and those conversions are really, really hard for large organizations to do. And so no opinion on that, but the point is that there's real technical issues going on, and that's not what's being talked about. And so it's just yet another example there being a disconnect between trustees yelling at administration that they're not doing it right, but they have absolutely really no idea what these people do.
Well, the administration wasn't straightforward about it. If they
they're both in the wrong, but the point is that who really misses out is the kids and the teachers that need good policies and good administration miss out on people actually managing things because they're playing politics with their musicians.
One thing that was also really interesting was at the end of the meeting, the board president, President Rodriguez, had to come back and ask for a revote on that item because he didn't abstain when he was supposed to, which means he had some kind of conflict of interest. Probably because he took a campaign donation or something from a vendor on that list.
And interestingly, he didn't know it. Somebody had to remind him.
Somebody had to remind him, and he had to go back and vote. So it's problematic.
That's really shady.
So then other big things that they talked about, employee health insurance, which if you again remember they talked about last month. The teachers union still presented a bunch of concerns, one of the biggest being a 7% cost increase. And again, there was talk about how this procurement process is so terrible again and again, but it still passed. This item actually passed 7-2 with Trustee Jones giving a really passionate speech about employees who are barely making it, and we're asking him to take more money. It was a really, I appreciated her standing up for those employees. And then finally, one of the last big issue that they talked about was cameras in special education classrooms. So again, the union talked a lot about their concerns, but they also were thankful to the administration because they had worked out a lot of issues beforehand, which is nice, always nice to hear, because that doesn't happen all the time. But there are still some questions. So if you don't know the background on this, the legislature passed a law a couple years ago that says any parent in a special ed classroom can request a camera. And which sounds really good in theory on surface value, but there's a lot of questions about, well, how long does the camera have to be on, and how much is it going to cost to store it, and who pays for it, and yada yada yada. And so there was just a lot of details that weren't really fleshed out in this proposal. but it's now in effect, this law. And so if you are a parent of a student in a special ed classroom, you can request a camera now. And now there's rules around that in HISD, but some of the questions that still remain are, how long does the camera have to stay? If a student leaves that classroom or moves to a different classroom, when can they take the camera down? And then also, I thought that HFT President Zeph Capo did a really great job in his speech of talking about how so many times when you go on these campuses, special ed classrooms are like on a trailer at the back of the campus, and that there are common sense, simple measures that don't cost money that we can do to make sure that these vulnerable students are safe by putting these classrooms in better locations. So the only other thing of note that really happened tonight that was interesting was a woman in the hearing of citizens. No. It was a woman.
It was an agenda item.
One of the speakers brought up a concern about payroll. It was actually the head of the support workers union. Said one of her employee, an employee from the district, hadn't been paid, and there are huge problems with the payroll system. And Trustee Jones jumped in and said, we need to figure this out. What's your name? Blah, blah, blah. Like, let's solve this now, like they do at City Council, which I think is great. And the attorney for the board, who we found out this week, gets paid $7,000 a month to be at these meetings, cut the conversation off, literally stepped in and cut her off and said, you cannot talk about this right now. It's not on the agenda. Like, that's it. It wasn't an advice where I advise you not to, or you shouldn't do this. It was like, you cannot. And she said, well, when can we talk about it?
And he said,
you can't, you can't. And so I found that incredibly frustrating. If I, as a parent, want to bring a concern or whatever, you want to have it be heard. So anyways.
I want to talk about one other thing. And that is the phenomenal lack of transparency by this board. One of the things that we're doing in trying to start this new parent advocates group is provide access for everybody who can't get a babysitter and be here and watch these things, or spend 4 hours of an evening being here and being connected. But the decisions that are made in that room have a real material impact on our kids. And the lawyers working for this board and the board themselves have surgically gone through the law required to the Open Meetings Act, and they do the bare minimum. Every one of the notices for these meetings comes out exactly 3 days before the meeting. If there's a closed session, they always put everything that they might talk about, essentially everything they're legally allowed to talk about, so that there's zero understanding when they're going into closed session what they're actually talking about. They just put all the various possible things that they could, so it completely masks what they're doing in closed session. And the trustees love to get out in the public, and they have all these events at schools, and there's and I noticed tonight that they're proudly telling everybody over the next weeks they're going to be coming around to all the schools with the superintendent doing these listening sessions, and they're happy to get the word out about those PR opportunities. But we also noticed the trustees talking among themselves about an upcoming board meeting next week on some topic that they already know that's going to happen, but we as the public don't know. And so if we're trying to get somebody there to pay attention, we always get 3 days notice. 3 days notice. And if they're meeting on a Monday, we get the agenda and the notice of that on a Friday afternoon. And so whether it's that, or the amount of time they allow parents to talk at these meetings, or the amount of information that they put out, they do the legal bare minimum, and Thompson and Horton, the board council, helps them accomplish the bare minimum that they need to do to provide the legal transparency, and that's all we get. But we have a $2 million communications budget from HISD administration to give us all the information they want us to hear.
Right.
But just being involved with your board of trustees, they make it extraordinarily hard. And that's something we're going to visit on a regular basis. Hopefully this is helping people. Hopefully you're getting some information. We just started, this is our second video for the second meeting, but we put up a Facebook page under HISD Parent Advocates. There's a website now, not a lot of content there, but coming, hisdparents.org. You can find us on Twitter at HISD_parents. And we're going to begin the process of taking all the public information requests that we've been putting in over the last several weeks and months, starting to organize them online. If y'all have questions that you want put into, maybe you don't know how to do a public information request, we'll help you do that. You let us know what you want to find out. If there's questions that you want to know about the board meetings or what we explained here, ask them in the comments or post them to the Facebook page, and we'll get back to you. So this is for a wide group of folks, not just us here. We hope to hear from you. So thanks, y'all.
Good night.
Good night. And fade out.